but I'm going to take the opportunity to speak very quickly about what we have been doing on the domestic front. If somebody would turn back on the projector. Yes, Brodrick has invited himself to give a presentation. But seriously, actually, we thought it was kind of important for the audience to be aware of some of the things that we've been doing. I'm going to rush through this very quickly so that we can get on to some discussion. This morning, the Premier spoke a little bit about what we've been doing, building on a thriving and sustainable financial services sector. I'm going to just highlight in a little bit more detail those 10 initiatives that he was speaking about. This slide was to add some context. I'm going to skip past it. I just want to highlight that the reality is that virtually everybody in the BVI is touched by financial services. I don't care how we run from it. I don't care how important we say tourism is. Sorry, Sharon. Everybody in the BVI is touched by financial services. The further reality, though, is that the world is changing. We've given some statistics showing how our core business is declining, how we're losing a little bit of our competitive edge, and how we've not been able to provide the value-added services. One of my panelists spoke very well about the need to where we need to get to in terms of substance. The fact of the matter is that the trend that we're seeing continue. BVI could be up a creek. I'm not speaking doom and gloom. I am an eternal optimist, but sometimes you have to face reality. Premier said we've not been sitting by. We certainly haven't been sitting on our royals. We set out to develop a strategy and an implementation plan to try to continue what we have in this industry towards 2020 and beyond. There's a couple of things that we aligned on. I listed them there. But at the end of the day, we wanted to develop a strategic framework and an implementation plan to really move our financial services industry a little bit more. When we did the exercise, we kind of benchmarked ourselves against various IFC competencies. And what was a little bit alarming is that in only one category, we were to the extreme right, which means that we are best in class, and everybody knows that has to do with incorporating companies. In many other spaces, we were sort of middle of the road, and in some spaces, we were downright poor. I think it's a little bit difficult to read, even harder to read because I don't have my glasses. But I can tell you that the green highlights that we are in the middle of the road in areas such as our ability to make policy decisions and cost benefits, the existence of a differentiated tax regime, etc. We're doing fairly poorly in our ability to coordinate and execute plans. It's important to highlight this because we recognize that this has to be a strong function of whatever we do going forward. We actually have to get it done. We've been coming up with the ideas, but we've been very poor on actually getting it done. So here's a strategic vision that we are aligned on. We wanted to ensure that we have a thriving and sustainable financial services sector by obviously remaining a world leader in the core business of company and corporations. And we want to set about doing this by improving our international reputation and our level of customer services. We also want to expand into value-added service. We keep talking about expanding into value-added service, but we've never really given it a good go. We want to do so by trying to introduce innovative initiatives and attract good talent from wherever it is, outside the BVI, inside the BVI. We certainly want to build BVI lender capacity. And none of this can happen unless we have the enabling mechanisms to be able to do so. I'm going to speak a little bit more about this concept of a delivery unit. We are also doing some work in terms of our marketing function and some work in terms of our business development function. So, the top 10 priority initiatives. I should say that when we did this exercise, we came up with about 40 initiatives. We had the out-of-the-box ideas, ranging from how do we position ourselves to be a part of the institution, the internationalization of the renminbi. We had some crazy ideas to do with Bitcoin exchanges, etc. But the fact of the matter is that we were thinking about how do we actually set the BVI apart. When it came down to it, we realized that there's a lot of fundamentals that are actually missing within the BVI, or some fundamentals that need to be further developed. And we ultimately agreed on 10 of them that we need to focus on. Okay. Obviously, and some of the panelists talk about this already, pursue the tax initiatives. And what we mean simply by that is that we really want to become internationally compliant, especially internationally compliant in the transparency space and in the information exchange space. Very importantly, FSC customer service. Those of you that are in the industry, we've heard a lot of complaints about this. And when we say customer service, we don't mean customer service in the sense of how the phone is answered and so forth. What we really want to do is we want to build on the significant strengths that FSC has, but we want to make sure that we have the best culture in terms of our response time, our ability to be able to get transactions done, and generally just help the customers. Attracting value-added service. We want to identify and incentivize as a top priority getting value into the BVI. We've started to do a little bit of this when we look at things like arbitration, etc. We've seen the legal services developing quite nicely in terms of providing those value-added services, but we expect that we can do a lot more, and we're going to be putting our heads together with the industry to be able to incentivize the attraction of those services. Reforming immigration and labor. This is a tricky one. This is one that obviously involves some serious political will, but we want to be able to bring our immigration and labor policies in line with international best practice so that we are able to attain, retain, attract the right levels of labor that's needed to be able to actually drive some of these value-added industries. Now, we are not looking at this in isolation of the things that we know we need to do domestically in terms of building capability, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. I think you heard the Premier say that we cannot build none of these industries unless we build them from within, and that's going to be one of our central focus also, but we do recognize that we have to get with the times in terms of being able to facilitate using the right labor and immigration policies. Investing in infrastructure. We can't go anywhere without having an appropriate level of infrastructure that commensurate with the business that we're in. And we recognize that. That includes a convenient transportation system. Premier spoke about access. The Honorable Deputy Premier is always talking about access. We recognize that if we're going to be playing in a global world, we got to be able to come to the BVI and be able to leave the BVI. We also have to improve our communication system so that we can have seamless telecommunications. If you are going to be attracting, or if we are going to be attracting serious players in the asset management space or wherever else, we can't do it on some of the telecommunication systems and structures that we have currently. Establishing a delivery unit. This is very key to our initiatives. We need to build a world-class team that is going to be reporting at the higher levels of government, that's going to be driving what we're trying to achieve. Critical, revamping the International Financial Center. We want to look at IFC and turn it into a more quasi-type private sector organization where there is greater private sector input leadership. We effectively are going to be emulating some of the other IFCs that currently exist so that we can get greater levels of efficiency and effectiveness out of it. Strengthening the business development function. We do have an aspect of business development right now, but we need a more compelling and permanent establishment to be able to actually do business development. Right now we rely on a ad hoc think tank group of persons who then feeds ideas. The problem is, where do those ideas go? On some minutes on my desk, So we are actually going to be putting a dedicated development function in place to make sure that this is done. Engaging the population. We can't do enough of this without explaining to the population why we're doing it, without the population becoming more sensitive to the importance of the financial services industry, etc. And so we've already started on a campaign to work on that aspect of it, and obviously strengthen BVI lender capability. I am a product of given opportunities to develop my capability in the financial services sphere. There's a lot of other BVI lenders in the room like this, but we do recognize critically that we have to do a lot more. We need to bring more people, more BVI lenders into this industry, and we have to develop the capabilities so that they can service the needs of the industry. When we look back at a number of the efforts we've done, and believe you me, this is probably the capstone effort in a series of efforts that this government has undertaken since it's come into board. One of the critical things that have been lacking is implementation. And we recognize that the key to delivering on the recommendations and initiatives that we've come up with is that we have to have a relentless focus on implementation. And we're going to try to have an integrated approach to doing that by setting up a delivery unit, using some initiative working teams to get the initiatives off the ground, and certainly seeking national support for the transformation. The delivery unit will be really the focus and the driver of this transformation. We're going to make sure it succeeds because we're going to have it reporting to a small board chaired by the Premier that's going to provide the oversight, and then ultimate reporting to the highest levels of government, which is effectively cabinet. We're right now trying to identify a strong leader, very high capabilities, competencies, experience, etc. And what we're hoping to do is we're going to have it staffed with a small cadre of professionals, delivery specialists, data analysts, communications specialists. These guys are going to sit in a war room 24 hours a day. Well, that's a little exaggeration, but we're literally going to have them sit in a war room and work as a very cohesive team with all that competence to drive what we're trying to do. They're going to be responsible for managing the performance and driving the delivery, solving the problems that exist, and providing support for the working teams that are actually moving the initiatives. We want to see them debottlenecking progress where that's necessary, and they are going to serve as a central coordinating point to all of the initiative leaders and working teams. Now, we concluded this work probably about a month ago, and we don't want to lose momentum on it. And so what we did is we set up initiative working teams to do the starting point of trying to deliver on these initiatives. And each of those working teams is headed by what we call a sponsor that grew out of the initiative. They were part of the steering committee that headed the entire initiative, and their role is going to be to kick off the priority initiatives by aligning on the work plans and agreeing on the major decisions to be made, collaborating closely with who they have to work with, especially the delivery unit and the systems within government, as well as the regulatory report, and then to hand off to the delivery unit to continue the initiative. I can tell you that all the sponsors of these initiatives are taking them seriously, and we are been working with our committees that we've put together to actually stand up these initiatives, and you'll be hearing a little bit more about them. I think some of the people in the audience are also on these initiative working teams. And finally, support for this transformation. I spoke about political will. I can't stress more, Premier, Deputy Premier, other politicians, that there is going to require some political will in moving some of these initiatives. We obviously going to need understanding and support from the BVI landers and BVI residents, because I think without you, it's not going to happen. So in my view, the real test in getting this out of the ground and eventually having success is that the country has to stand behind us on this, the industry has to stand behind us on this. These are fundamentals that are absolutely required if we are going to grow our industry and, frankly, if you think about it, maintain and save our industry. These fundamentals have to be right, and we believe that we would have set ourselves up. Then we can start thinking about the out-the-box ideas. So